Hi, everyone. Welcome back. As we continue our partnership with the Legacy Expo, I'm really excited to share today's episode with you. We dive into a deeply personal and important conversation with Stacey Brown from Soaring Spirits Canada. Stacey's story of widowhood at 35 shines a light on the importance of supporting widow grief, and her work with Soaring Spirits is truly changing the way widowed individuals find community they need. We talk about the challenges faced by those navigating grief, the incredible impact of peer support, and even touch on some exciting updates coming from Soaring Spirits. Stacey's honesty and dedication to the work really shines through in this conversation, so let's jump in. Stacey, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you for having me.
To get us started, can you tell us more about Soaring Spirits Canada and share your personal journey in how you got involved with the organization?
Absolutely. Soaring Spirits Canada is a fairly new registered charity and a nonprofit organization that works to connect widowed people and with peer support and resources. And I became involved with our sister organization, Soaring Spirits International, when my husband died when I was 35. So I had met Andre at 18 and knew from the start that he had a heart condition. Um, but at 18, I wasn't thinking about marriage, let alone widowhood and what that would mean. At 18, all it meant was that he didn't drink, and so we had a designated driver to make sure we all got home. But all the things that came later just became part of our normal lives. Doctor's appointments, cardiac care, surgeries, and later trips to the transplant clinic were all just became part of our normal lives. Um, Andre's condition was one where he generally had a really good quality of life, but then he would have a crisis, and there'd be a few bad days, weeks, months, and then we'd be back to road trips and ridiculous theme parties and all of the good things that we enjoyed. So um, nobody really expected, although he was sick and he had a very bad heart, nobody expected him to die at 37. In fact, the day before his heart failed, he had been at the transplant clinic in Halifax, and they had decided that it was time to officially put him on the list. But he was young and otherwise healthy, and there was no reason to think that he wouldn't have another 25 years with a new heart. And when you're 35, 25 years is a whole lifetime. So um, it was just seemed to us like we were moving to the next phase of dealing with his medical condition. So I was, although my husband had been very ill, I was very unprepared uh, to be widowed at 35. Not that I think you actually can be prepared, no matter what notice you have. Um, so I always knew that I would be widowed, but I didn't know at 18, 25, at 35, I didn't really know what that was going to mean for me. I knew that I'd be sad,
Yeah.
but I didn't really understand all the ways that that would change me and my life. That was, where I found myself was suddenly in this whole new life experience without any resources or support or people around me who could help with that. And I actively rejected my widowed life. I was terrified that accepting any part of it as being okay would mean that I was okay with Andre dying, and that moving forward meant losing my connection with Andre, and that life together that I'd loved. So um, I was struggling. I was dealing with some of the secondary losses, like having a family in the future that we had planned. Andre and I had been in the process of adopting, and it was 2 months after he died on our wedding anniversary that after 7 long years, I got the call to say, congratulations, you're at the top of the adoption wait list, and we're ready to start, processing you for a placement. And Uh, Fortunately, unfortunately, adoption services also go is works by the theory of one of the greatest myths about widowhood, that it just takes a year and then everything's fine. So they said, oh, if there's been a death in the family, we wouldn't do a placement for at least a year. But after a year, I still, wasn't barely able to look after myself. I certainly
Yeah.
wasn't able to bring somebody else into a life that I was not enjoying. So I was really struggling with finding resources. The programs in my community were all faith-based, and I'm not a religious person. They were all geared towards seniors, and I was 35 and felt that my experience was different. So it was late one night that I Googled, is it normal for widowed people to stop cooking? Because I had no interest in making anything. I was living like, like a college student. If I couldn't pull it out of the fridge and eat it with my fingers, it wasn't going to happen. I had zero interest in cooking anything at all. And so I was like, is that normal? Like, and I came across a blog that talked about widowing the coffee. And like, how do you widow the coffee? Well, you forget the coffee, you forget the water, you forget to turn it on, you forget to turn it off. and it talked really lightheartedly, but honestly, about how all the things uh, that you used to do automatically suddenly require extra thought. So whether that's how much coffee you're making, how much spaghetti you're putting in the pot, who takes out the garbage, remembering to check the mail, things that just happened in your life without you ever giving it a conscious thought, suddenly now take all this extra brain power and all this energy and make it really hard for you to focus and to do things. And I thought, it was funny. It was, it reflected what I was experiencing. And I thought, I have found my people. There are other people out there who are, going through the same things that I am. So luckily, there was a link on that blog to Widowed Village, which is Soaring Spirits' private online community for widowed people. And connecting to uh, Widowed Village opened up the door to lots of people who, not everybody shared the same journey, but there was always somebody who was up at 2 a.m. Wondering what they were going to do with their husband's shoes. So you always felt like you had somebody, because people tell you, call anytime, but they really don't want you to call at 2 a.m. to say, what am I going to do with the shoes?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so finding a community and a resource where I could connect with other widowed people as I needed to was really helpful. And it was from there that I decided I didn't have anything to lose. I was going to put myself on a plane and go to Myrtle Beach to go to Camp Widow. Um, and I thought I might hate it. I thought it might be too kumbaya and like plastic Kleenex. But it's Myrtle Beach, and if I hate it, I'll just go sit in the sand for 3 days by myself. Um, and it was a life-changing experience for me. So that was where I first connected with Soaring Spirits.
And there is a fact, research around this when a loved one dies in a family unit, whether it's a partner, a child, a parent, and it's been shown that this type of loss greatly impacts the brain. It's almost seen as a brain injury in that you are so accustomed to someone. Let's say you go to one child for tech help, you go to another child for artistic help, and then you go to your parents for electrical help, you go to your partner for fixing the stuff around the house, you go to the other partner for cooking. When that person's gone, it's like, oh, wait, what's happening? And I'll try and find the article and I'll add it to the show notes. It's been shown that it's very similar to a brain injury because your brain is like, what's going on? How do I cope? How do I navigate this? So it is very real in that there's physical aspects when it comes to grief. Like it does impact your body in a lot of ways, which I think a lot of people may not necessarily recognize or truly appreciate the reality of that. Um, so the fact that you were like, I just want to, let's say you're eating cheese, I just want to put cheese in my mouth and not think about making the pizza, just put it out there. But
Exactly. And I that was one of the things for me that in all the resources that I came across early on in my widowhood, the one that connected the most for me wasn't actually a book on grief. It was a book on neuroplasticity and how the
mhm,
brain changes and heals and adapts over time. And there was a chapter on what happens when we fall in love and a very small follow up to that about what happens when the person we love dies. And it talked about how our brain creates all these shortcuts to just automatically click. And
yeah,
and when our person dies, our brain has to rewire all those things. So if you always sit down and the first chair across from you is always Andre's chair, then you you see the chair and you think that's Andre's chair, and then you think, Andre's not here, and you have to reprogram that. Or you run into somebody at the mall and you say, "Oh, I got to tell Andre that I saw." Nope, I got to rewire that. So your brain does a million calculations a day
yeah,
to try and reconnect all of these shortcuts that you have built over a lifetime with somebody. And it's overwhelming and it's exhausting.
yeah,
And it can I remember being very angry, not about the death and all the stages of death. I was angry that society hadn't prepared me for widowhood. How was it that I had no idea that there was going to be actual physical impacts to grief? That how did nobody around me know how to support a grieving person? How is that possible? We have been dying as long as we've been living. How is it possible that we as a society are not prepared for that and aren't prepared for each other to do that? So the physical stuff was really surprised to me. And I remember being really frustrated that I hadn't thought of that as I'm not being able to read.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
Lifelong bookworm, and suddenly I can't focus enough to read more than a newspaper article. And being terrified that whether or not that was ever going to come back. Like, is this permanent?
yeah,
So connecting with other widowed people and knowing that that's very normal and that it will come back eventually, not as fast as any of us would like, but knowing that that was a normal part of the process was really helpful to me.
yeah. And it goes to show the reality of and the importance of peer support and connection. It's so crucial when going through grief moments. For widowed folks in particular, how would you say Soaring Spirits is facilitating that peer support? And how have you seen this impact participants going through this experience with you guys?
Yeah, well, I can say for myself that peer support made all the difference for me, because knowing what I was experiencing was normal was a huge relief. And going from not having anybody in my peer group who had been widowed or understood what that felt like to being in a room with 100, 200 in San Diego this summer, 400 widowed people who all get it, and just knowing that whatever it is that you're going through, there's somebody else there that is going through or has been through the same thing, and that you're not alone in your grief was incredibly powerful and incredibly helpful. I have friends that I met at my very first Camp Widow in 2012 that I still connect with on a weekly basis, that we have seen each other through widowhood, through remarriage, through the loss of second partners, and it has been a support network for me for over a decade. People that I connected with on that first weekend, um, and it helped because when I came back from Camp Widow, it was okay that everybody else around me didn't get it, because I suddenly had this community that did. So if I was struggling, I didn't have to rely on the people at home to find a way to support me. I could reach out to the connections that I had made through Camp Widow and talk to other people who had either been through that or were going through it at the same time. And so it took the pressure off my friends to try and figure out whether what I was doing was normal. And it gave me a place to connect. Um, and when you feel like you no longer fit in your old life, having a space that normalizes your experience is incredibly powerful. So, over the past 12 years, I've witnessed physical and emotional changes that happen when we provide a safe space for widowed people, not only to share the challenges of grieving, but also to celebrate their successes and to celebrate the strength that it takes to carry on and rebuild your life. And every year at camp, I watch people arriving at registration. You can always spot the new people because they are wide-eyed, terrified, and thinking, how did this become my life? How did I end up at a widow conference? Because that's exactly what I was thinking at 35 when I'm going down the escalator and thinking, how did I get here? And and at every event, I see the same people so people arrive Thursday night, Friday, terrified, unsure, not sure whether they've made the right decision to, come to this Camp Widow. And by Saturday night, I see the same people laughing, dancing. We have a full out party on Saturday night. And then Sunday morning they're exchanging hugs and phone numbers with people who are going to become their key supports and their lifelong friends, the same way that I made those connections at camp. I remember one woman in particular who I met on a Friday in a discussion group, and she was really struggling. She was very newly widowed, less than a year, and her husband had died on their honeymoon, and she was having a really hard time. And by Saturday night, she was almost unrecognizable. She came to the dance. She was dressed to the nines. She had her hair and her makeup done, and she was on the dance floor all night. And so when I got the chance to talk to her, I said, I have to tell you how wonderful it is to see you smiling and laughing and feeling so much better. And she said, this is the first time since my husband died that I've caught a glimpse of my old self. That there's no safe place for me at home. There's no way I could go to a wedding or a party and laugh and dance and be myself without judgment, without people thinking that I was a bad widow, that I had, that I had somehow being disrespectful to my husband, but that it felt so good to know that it was possible to feel good again, to have that, um, even just for a few hours, to have that release and to have a safe place to just, you know, feel good, and without feeling guilty about feeling good. So this year in Tampa, um, they shared a story. I guess it was in San Diego. They shared a story about an organization that they had been approached about supporting Soaring Spirits and Camp Widow, and they had declined funding because it sounded like too much fun. Uh, but it didn't immediately, like, it just stuck with me and it bothered me about that, because when we when we have somebody in our life who is grieving, what would you give to see them smiling, laughing, dancing, even if it's just for a few hours? If all we want for the people in our lives who are grieving is for them to find comfort and peace and hope for their future. And sometimes hope means dancing and knowing that it's possible to dance again. Sometimes hope is seeing other widowed people laughing and smiling and living genuinely happy, fulfilled widowed lives and knowing that it's possible. And just learning that while we all have different stories and pathways in our healing, that we're not alone in our grief. And so the fact that someone would say, "Oh, it just looks like too much fun." To be fair, when everybody comes home from camp, all the pictures that we post are the hugs, the smiles, the dancing. Usually there's a theme, so it might be a costume, photo booth photos. The pictures that we put out were on social media when someone comes home from camp, all those really happy moments. But what doesn't make it to social media is the tremendous amount of healing that also happens at camp. So that's partly because of our carefully curated program, widowed presenters who we make sure that there's something for everybody with sessions based on how long you've been widowed, whether that's within the first year or 5 years plus. There's something for everybody, based on your timeline or on your life situation, like whether or not you've been widowed with kids or without kids, whether you with the type of loss that you've had, and then also just general sessions on finances, careers, health and well-being, uh, creative therapy. So we have a really carefully curated program to help facilitate that healing and those discussions. But equally powerful is the deeply personal conversations that happen in the hotel lobby, in between sessions, over lunch, by the pool, by the bar. And those conversations where people can let down the "I'm fine" facade and actually, say what's in their heart, who can actually talk about things that make non-widowed people, family and friends, who are all very supportive, but it would make them very uncomfortable. We can have conversations about what happened when the ambulance came, how's our relationship with our in-laws has changed. um, we can have that conversation only because we have built a community where there's an understanding of how hard it is to live widowed and to rebuild your life without your person. So that's how it's as much in the sessions and connecting people in the sessions as it is providing the opportunity and the space for widowed people to connect themselves.
And so you mentioned it's 400 people at some of these. Like I heard that number correctly? That's
Yes, I don't know
remarkable.
the exact number in San Diego, but Soaring Spirits International, has much larger events in Toronto. This year, we're in November. We're expecting about 250 people at Camp Widow in Toronto. So
That's remarkable. And the ripple effects that that's also likely having in those people's lives. And also the reality of, like you said, they can have these conversations where they say, instead of saying, "I'm totally fine," they can just be like, "I am fucked up and sad." Like, are we gonna?
exactly. I am not okay. and often just hearing somebody else say, "Oh yeah, I had that too." So for me, coming up to my 5 year anniversary of Andre's death, I was prepared for that better because I had other people who had said, "You know what, 5 years was weird. It just felt both like it couldn't possibly have been 5 years, and that I had been carrying this weight for a full 5 years." So people had said that 5 years was a heavy, heavy one, but that after the anniversary, like after that 5 year mark, there was kind of a release. Like you felt like you have done what you should have for as being a good widow. Nobody should have any other expectations on you. That there was kind of a freedom that came from that. And so I had that in the back of my mind So when I was starting to have these thoughts, come on, it's been 5 years. How can I still be struggling? I knew, because of my connections with other widowed people, that that was really normal. And I could reach out to those
Yeah.
people and say, how did you get through this, and what helped, and what did you do to mark 5 years?
And you even mentioned that society does not prepare folks for these types of situations when they come up. We have no discussions around it. It's very much like when it happens, you deal with it when it happens versus, hey, by the way, this will happen eventually. Here's how you can navigate it. And I view that as an opportunity to really adjust how we have these conversations, how they're brought up, whether it's taught in school, whether it's changes in policy when they're being developed. Are there any examples that you can speak to or touch on when it comes to a successful policy or program initiative that you've implemented with Soaring Spirits in a way to encourage people to like have these discussions and incorporate them, whether it's in the workplace, educational institutions, what have you?
Well, Soaring Spirits Canada is still a fairly new organization. And so we are still in the infancy of our policy and programming. Our focus has been really on the Camp Widow event. So Soaring Spirits Canada became its own registered charity in 2020, just in time for COVID.
Excellent timing.
Exactly what every conference planner so there, understandably, our first few years had been focused on getting the organization up and running and taking over running Camp Widow Toronto from Soaring Spirits International. So prior to that, there was a Camp Widow Toronto, but it was put on by the Soaring Spirits International organization, who would bring a team from the States up and put on this event in Canada. With the creation of the Soaring Spirits Canada board, we have taken over the running of that organization. So there was a bit of a transition in getting a team up and running and taking over that programming. And luckily, we have a very dedicated board who was absolutely committed to providing the same high quality programming and sense of community that people expect from a Soaring Spirits event. So that has been our focus. We're just now getting to the part where we can start talking about what else are we going to do. and but in terms of policy, in my day job, I do policy and governance work, and for a Crown corporation. And you and I have a shared passion for changing ridiculously outdated bereavement leave policies and legislation.
Yes, go on.
So, so at my work, we were in the process of updating our bereavement leave policy, and um, I had been given the task of kind of giving my 2 cents on it from a policy perspective, but I couldn't just leave the I could go without saying something about the bereavement
You
policy.
can't. You
So
have to.
I had to. The our New Brunswick legislation required 3 days of paid leave, and my company very generously would give 5 days paid leave for the loss of immediate family. And uh I knew from my experience over a decade of working with widowed people that I was not the only person who thought 5 days was inadequate for all of the responsibilities and healing that somebody has to do when they have lost a spouse or a child. And so I took that back to my HR, uh, the vice president of HR and my director, and said, "I like this is really not adequate." But I was told that in the very rare situations in which they had had somebody with a death in the family, that they always did, they always found a way to do the right thing. They would always accommodate that person. my counter to that was, if you're always going to accommodate, why don't we make a policy? That way, in a moment of crisis, we don't have to figure out what it is we're going to do. And it's the same for everybody, no matter who your manager or your director is. We can we can work out what it is that we actually are going to do for people. In the Hopefully we never have to use it, but we have a plan on
And
how we would accommodate.
and also having like in that moment, I can imagine folks often if they see something in the policy and it's not what they need or what they're looking for, feeling as if they're going to have to fight for those extra days, those extra whatever they need, right? So it also just eliminates another barrier for the folks to access the support and the time and the resources that they need going through this experience.
Absolutely. As a newly widowed person, I had no idea what I was going to need. I had no idea what I was going to have to do. In those first 3 days, you can't even plan the funeral really in 3 days. And so they're thinking ahead about what it is that widowed people need and how can we accommodate that beforehand. If you're always going to do the right thing, let's just figure out what that is now. So luckily for me, in our bereavement policy, or our leaves and benefits policy, we had incorporated a section on domestic violence leave. So the New Brunswick government had recently made mandatory for employers to provide time off for employees who were dealing with domestic violence. So that included time to find a new home, deal with lawyers, courts, police, therapy for them or their children, medical appointments, and it was paid leave of up to 15 days that could be taken all at once or as needed. And our company policy also included the option for longer unpaid leave for victims of domestic violence, which is terrific. Um, and then I get to the section on bereavement leave, and it's this measly little paragraph that says, if your person dies, you get 5 days. And again, that was more generous than what the law said was 3 days. But when I made the case that although the cause of the trauma is different for victims of domestic violence and people who have experienced a death, a lot of the needs are the same. You may need time to deal with lawyers and sometimes courts and financial situations and therapy for you and your children, medical appointments, any number of things that are related to the death, and that we already are recognizing this impact for domestic violence victims. Why would we not do the same for somebody who was experiencing trauma from death? And it's really hard to argue with a widow with lived experience. This is what I needed.
I dare you do it. I dare you.
It's very hard to say to someone, no, 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 it's not what you needed. You only needed 5 days. So it was successful, and luckily we were able to change our company's policy. So now it's not perfect, but now there are 15 days of paid leave that people can either take all at once or as needed for all those kinds of appointments and things. It's clearly laid out for managers what they are allowed to give people time off for, and all the parameters about keeping their benefits and all of that stuff is already established. So in the event that somebody is widowed, there is a plan for at least the first 15 days to kind of give people this time to figure out whether they need to take vacation time or sick time after that, whether or not they need to arrange for a longer term unpaid leave. At least gives more breathing room to figure out how else we would accommodate somebody who needed that support. So it was that was a good victory. And while I still am convinced we need to change the law, I feel like there is a role for widowed people to use their own experience to advocate for the changes in their own workplaces that will, provide better support for people who come after them. And I would love to see that eventually as a Soaring Spirits initiative, and take that on. But right now, I think it's A conversation with your HR director can be really powerful and could have a big impact for somebody else who is widowed later on.
Folks listening know that I'm a tyrant when it comes to this because I'm like, we need to give 6 months. We need to give a year, 2 years, paid everything that they need because the reality is grief is not a 2 week, 3 week thing. It can not hit you for up to a year. Being able to take that time off when it hits you in a year and a half is super important because not everyone grieves that linear way in that, like, oh, this happened. I'm going to experience it in 2 days. It's going to hit me in 2 days and then I'm going to get that time off. Some people can go 6 months to a year being totally quote unquote fine, bunny ears. And then the 1 year mark hits and it's like, whoa, what is happening? Who am I? What did I just go through? But they may not have the time to be able to take off. So being able to see these policy changes slowly taking place makes me very, very optimistic that I will get the future of bereavement leave. That's like a year and a half.
I'm in
Super
favor.
exciting.
I'll start with 3 weeks, and but because it's better than 3 days. But yeah, I agree. At least having something that recognizes that as a, oh,
Yeah.
you know what, there
Yeah.
are things that widowed people are going to have to deal with. It's not a, you know, done in a few days thing. Well, then, you know, give other managers and directors the opportunity to say, okay, well, no, she's still dealing with this, so we can still accommodate that, and lets people know that, oh, if you have to take your kids to a therapy appointment, yeah, don't worry about it, go do it. It says in my policy I can let you do that,
Yeah.
because there are different managers who interpret things differently, and you have the managers who would be like, oh no, absolutely, you could take the afternoon to go take your kids to therapy, and there'd be others who say, okay, well, you're going to have to take your vacation leave or your sick time or your whatever, right? And so creating something that evens that playing field also means that
Yeah.
everybody in the organization gets treated fairly, um, even if not ideally.
Is there any advice or insight or suggestions that you want to share with folks who know someone who is a widow, either recently widowed or has been for a while, that could better support them during just whenever they're grieving or just in general, if like an anniversary date is coming up? Any insight onto there?
I think that and I mean, I may be a little biased to give my own position there, but actually, connecting people with resources and connecting people with other widowed people is a gift, right? If you don't understand what somebody is experiencing, giving them information about the resources out there, and people might feel awkward about that. But you know, when somebody dies, we make donations to Heart and Stroke or the Kidney Foundation or something related to the cause of death. But equally important are resources that support the person who's still living. So a donation to Soaring Spirits Canada, uh, and a note that says, I don't know what you're going through, but I hope you find the support you need. And I've made a donation to this organization, puts them in touch with connection to with resources. We also have uh, tons of free resources on our websites, and one of the one of the things that family and friends can do is they can go online and order a newly widowed packet, and there are a version specifically for Canadians that is a helpful resources, some checklists, how to, make sure that you've taken care of lots of things. It puts them in touch with some of the resources that are available through Soaring Spirits Canada and Soaring Spirits International, and just gives people a starting point. And they may not be ready for it on day one, but the day that they need it, they can say, oh, there was something about connecting with other widowed people. They can go and find the organization just knowing that it's out there. And so in our one of the programs that Soaring Spirits International has is regional groups. So we have volunteers who host local events or local get-togethers and meetings for people in their community to connect in person. And one of the things that uh, we always offer is if you're nervous about coming, bring a friend. Like for your first one, bring somebody with you so okay, it's not that scary. They're all really nice people. And if you're nervous about doing, but being that support person who says, I'll go with you. Like I'll come with you the first one. Like if you're worried about showing up alone at a restaurant with a bunch of strangers,
Yeah.
normal. But I'll go with you and we'll check it out. And if it's not for you, fine. We could just go sit at the bar. But helping to connect people with resources is really helpful. One of the I'll call it one of the perks of being a young widow with nobody else around you who knows anything about widowhood is that you can kind of set the tone. So when the people around me started getting awkward about talking about Andre and sharing memories or jokes, uh, I was able to say, I need you to keep talking about it. I need you to say his name. I need you to share the stories and the jokes because if I am the only person responsible for keeping all of that memory, that's a huge burden. Andre was
Yeah.
larger than life. There's a lot of stories to keep. And every time somebody else shares a memory or shares a story or makes a comment about something Andre loved or would like, then that is helpful to me in knowing that I am not the only person responsible for keeping his memory alive.
And when it comes to the future of Soaring Spirits Canada, you mentioned that there's a lot that you're working towards, want to implement, want to create in the Canadian front. How do you envision the
Absolutely.
future of it looking? Yeah, like what do you see for the future? What's the reach you want? What's the impact? Tell me what you see in your crystal ball.
Well, like I said, we have focused the first 4 years have really been on, you know, getting things up and running and getting established and making sure that we were carrying off this event. Now we're coming to the end of our first strategic plan and getting ready to look ahead at the next 3 years. And personally, as a policy nerd, that's going to involve some of those foundational work of creating the policies and structure for the organization. But in terms of programming, our sister organization, Soaring Spirits International, or our parent organization, they have made significant changes to the way that they do Camp Widow. So previously, up till now, it's been uh, they've hosted 3-day events in 2 different cities, and the same cities every year. And now this year, they are making a change to do 1-day pop-up events in 4 different cities to make it more accessible, to make it a little more affordable, and to bring it closer to more people, with the intent of changing those cities every year and moving camp around, uh, taking it on the road. In Canada, with we're still an entirely volunteer organization. And so with our capacity, we thought this year we're still, for 2024, 2025, we're still going to stay with 1 3-day Camp Widow event, but we're excited to see how it goes in the States and to look forward at adding maybe a Vancouver or Halifax or moving these 1-day events into other parts of Canada so that we can reach more widowed people. While the regional group programs, those local community groups, is still run by Soaring Spirits International, but we're really want to encourage more of those in Canada. So right now there are 12 regional groups across Canada, and we would like to see that increase every year because it really does help people bring that camp experience home. You don't have to wait till once a year to connect with widowed people. Here in Fredericton, we have 3 events a month. We go for dinner one week. There's a coffee break, uh, get together the next week, and then the last Sunday of the month we go for brunch. And it's just an opportunity for widowed people to get together. And a lot of times we talk about grief and widowhood, and other times we just talk about our lives and how we are, celebrating our successes. How, the person who was able to downsize and move to a new place, and the person who, got through their son's graduation and how hard that was. And it's a really, really good community. So we want to see that grow across Canada. And we're also watching Soaring Spirits International is doing some pilots with programs and training for first responders and hospitals, those people who are the first person that somebody interacts with when they are widowed. And how can we help those people connect widowed people to resources and supports, and how they react to somebody, and how that can shape their experience as a widowed person. For instance, if you are in a common law relationship and the first person that you encounter as a widow doesn't recognize your status as a widow because you're not married, then you may not feel entitled to all of the supports or feel like you can access the programs and the services that are available for widowed people. Where with Soaring Spirits, we consider, if you have lost the person that was your spouse that you shared your life with, married, unmarried, we are open to everybody who has that experience.
I feel like
So we want to,
I feel like there's a cross collaboration in the works with Camp Aaron at some point.
hopefully we have had an initial conversation with Camp Aaron. Only enough to know that we are holding our events on the same weekend in June next year.
Oh, nice.
So, um, so in San Diego, they have had a kids camp program as part of Soaring Spirits Camp Widow in San Diego. And that's not been something that we've done in Toronto. Again, we're still a small 100% volunteer run organization at this point. And so it's not something that we have had the capacity to do now, but a collaboration with an existing program like Camp Aaron or another organization that is already doing programming for grieving kids would be wonderful to explore in the future. Yeah.
So good. So exciting. So, so exciting. And my final question for you is, how do you want to be remembered?
Uh, well, uh I have a quote that I wrote out and stuck on my desk 10 years ago. And it's been on my desk, for the last decade. And I've got it right here in front of me. And it says, I do not want your legacy to be that your death permanently broke me. Your life, your love, and my love for you will sustain my survival. And so I knew that I didn't want to be remembered as somebody who was never the same. Although have never been the same and will never be the same. It was very, for me early on, I didn't want to be remembered as somebody who was broken um, by my experience. And so um, when I was first grieving the loss of Andre and that family and that future, that I'd planned, I had a lot of love and support, but I could not have foreseen then all the love and joy that was still to come in my life. It just wasn't, I didn't have the capacity at that point. But today, I'm not only a wife again, but I have wonderful stepchildren, three beautiful grandbabies that I adore. And I've told everyone in my family that my final wishes are to be made into a diamond. Because in part, I mean, I like shiny things, but also because I really believe that the stress and pressure that I've lived through has made me stronger, that it's made me more transparent and extremely valuable to the people in my life. So I want to be remembered as somebody whose loss made me love deeply, support others, and strengthen my relationship with my friends and family.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Do you know which company you're going with for being turned into a
I
diamond?
don't.
Okay.
I'll leave that up to them. I want to be a diamond, several diamonds.
I I have recommendations. Not that I've gone through
Oh,
the
good.
process or anything, but yeah, there's a few really good companies that are doing some really good work out there. So super, super exciting.
Yeah, Andre was Catholic and very opposed to cremation. And so um if I had known how little cremains it takes to create a diamond, Andre would have been buried with a bald spot for some of his hair to have him made into a diamond. But um fortunately for him, I didn't know that at the time.
The universe works in mysterious ways.
That's right. That's right. He got his way.
Stacey, is there anything else you'd like to share? Any final thoughts? And let folks know how they can get into contact with you.
Uh, well, you can visit our website at www.soaringspirits.ca, and that will connect you not only to the programs that we offer here in Canada, like the Camp Widow Toronto, which is November 7th to 10th. And then again, we're switching after this year. We've always held it in November, but this year we're in 2025, we're switching to June. So we'll be the first weekend in June in Toronto for 2025. I really encourage people to check it out. It really is a life-changing experience for anybody who's
Yeah.
experiencing widowhood. Also, our website will connect you to all the resources that are available from Soaring Spirits International and Widowed Village, which there are tons of free resources, webinars, discussion groups, videos, and information, and that private community for widowed people. So that's how people can best find us.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I learned a lot and I loved learning all of this with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Listeners, I really hope you found this conversation with Stacey powerful and insightful. Her work with Soaring Spirits is just a reminder of the importance of community and how a strong support network is incredibly necessary when it comes to navigating loss. It's clear that Stacey and the entire Soaring Spirits organization is determined to ensure that no one walks through widowhood alone. If you're interested in learning more about Soaring Spirits or the resources we mentioned, be sure to check out the show notes for links and additional information. And if you enjoyed this episode, we'd love if you gave us a 5-star review and followed us online at Philotimo Life. That's PHILOTIMOLIFE. Until next time.